Sure. So I was born in Taiwan. I grew up in Argentina, in Buenos Aires, and then moved to Boston, where I did my undergraduate at Boston University. I studied psychology. I then went to Princeton Seminary, where I got my MDiv and THM, and I was pastor in New Jersey for a number of years. I was in New Brunswick. Actually, I was in New Brunswick on September 11th, 2001, when
Wow.
yeah, on this 19 years ago today, I was in New Jersey. Four members of my church worked in the World Trade Center. So thankfully they got out, but two of them were inside when the planes hit. They were in the
Wow.
building when the planes hit. So it was, yeah. So I remember 19 years ago today was very vivid. I lived it from New Jersey. I mean, you were here already, right? You were in New York.
Yes,
Yeah,
yes.
yeah. So I'm sure it was more intense for you.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
so I was pastor for a few years at a I'm ordained in a Presbyterian church. After a few years of pastoring, I went to the University of Virginia, where I got my PhD in sociology. And this book was my doctoral dissertation project. And
Mm.
so I was taking an ethnography class. This was early on, one of my, probably, I think my first year, I was taking an ethnography class because I knew I wanted to do an ethnography for my dissertation. And the professor said to go somewhere that's new and interesting to you, and take notes, right? Somewhere you've never been. And so as a Presbyterian, I said, well, I'm interested in religion and I'm interested in studying Latino communities. So I went to a Latino Pentecostal church. And the first Sunday I was in there, it was a very traditional Pentecostal church. And then at the end, during the offering time, the guy said, anybody who brings $100 will get $10,000 by the end of the year.
What?
And so I stuck around to see what happened.
Uh-huh.
And that's how I ended up
What?
traveling all across the country to study these communities. I was in California. I came to New York, right? So I studied a number of different uh, Spanish-speaking prosperity gospel Latino churches. And yeah, at the core of it, I was trying to understand why the role of religion in people's lives, right, from a sociological perspective. So it's very important. This is not a theology book, right? I always tell people, because I'm in a seminary, people think this is a theology book, but this is a cultural analysis of a religious movement in the roles of in the lives of individuals and communities, right? So what happens when individuals believe in something that's different than what they believed before? How does that affect their lives? And as it affects their lives, how does it affect their communities? And as it affects their community, how does it in turn affect the actual religion, right? Because it's a dialectical relationship, right? We shape cultures just like culture shapes us. And so that's what I was interested in, right? That there had to be something deeper in this. And through my studies of these communities, I study communities, Spanish speaking communities, prosperity gospel communities, who were large, most of them who one of them who had been here for a short time, the one in California, right? Because it's close to the border, people come and go, right? So most of the people there have been there for about 5 years, or 5 to 10 years. And then the community in Virginia have been there between 10 and 15, 10 and 20 years. And then the New York community was mostly Puerto Ricans and Dominicans. And they've been here for many
Mm.
decades. And so I was studying the role of prosperity gospel in the lives of immigrants at different stages of immigration. And it wasn't I didn't compare the three groups. Rather, I wanted to see what are the core beliefs that stays with them, right? Because as we grow in our faith, right, some things go, some things change, right? So I wanted to see what were the core beliefs that remain as immigrants evolve in their stages of immigration.
Wow. Yeah, I agree that the book is, uh, in reality, is an ethnographical analysis. What is the difference between ethnography and ethnology?
Well, ethnography is the method of immersing yourself, right? It's a sociological, social scientific method of immersing yourself in a community and telling the story, providing a theoretical grounding for the ways that people live their lives from their perspective, right? And that's a unique contribution that I think ethnography can give. And I thought this community, Pentecostal communities especially, it had to be ethnography because it's about the lived experience, right? So we can we can describe what a Pentecostal service is, but you had to be there to know what it actually was, right? For Presbyterians, not so much, right? I can tell you, I can describe what a Presbyterian service is. And then when you show up, you're like, oh, okay, that's what he said. Catholic services, I can tell you, there's going to be this, and then you show up and it's like, oh, okay. But I can describe to somebody who's never been to a Pentecostal church, no matter how many detailed, how descriptive I get, you show up at a Pentecostal service and it's nothing like what you imagine, right? It's just, you feel it in your core, right?
It reminds me of my grandmama when she was making beans, right?
Uh-huh.
And then one day, a brother from Texas came to her house, and I mean, he was an Anglo, and he was saying, oh, I'm seeing that you're cooking beans. What is the recipe? So my grandmama just looked at him and she said, well, if I'll give you the recipe, you will never know the flavor of my beans. So here is a bowl of beans and give it a try. So you're right. It's about being there. And one of the strengths of the book is that you were there. Because you participated in the life of the people. So you talk to them, you connected, right? Who you are with them, and you created relationships.
Yeah, so it wasn't just the in the churches, right? The way that this type of immersive ethnography is, I went to all their birthday parties, I went to their gatherings, I would go up to work with them, right? I would go with the parents to school to translate for them, right? Because the religion doesn't just affect you on Sundays or at home, right? It affects everything else, right? And that's what I was interested in. I wanted to see, somebody who believes this, right? How do they deal with a challenge in school? How do they deal with their co-workers? How when they go shopping and something is expensive, right? How do they think about how do they approach this, right? And for those things you have to be there. There's just so many natural conversations that pop up, right? And you had also asked about the ethnology, right? Ethnology is more individual based, I think, in my perspective, right? So ethnography is you try to theorize the behavior of an entire community, right? So you immerse yourself and you live from that experience, and you form theories that apply to the whole community. And ethnology for me, it is more individual, and you look at the characteristics of individuals, right? How are people, how do people, what kind of character traits, right? I think I often think of leadership studies, right? What's that book? The Millionaire Next Door, right? That's an ethnology study, right? This guy, he interviews a bunch of millionaires, right? And he describes their habits and how they think, how they spend money, right? That's an ethnology, right? They just tell you. But most leadership books, I think, are ethnologies, right? They get a bunch of Fortune 500 executives and they say, okay, all of them get up early. They have these rituals, they meditate, I think that's more ethnology, I think.
Yes. And I think that distinction between ethnography and ethnology is an important methodological distinction.
Yeah.
Because to really apply ethnography in the way that you did it in the book, you really have to invest quantity and quality of time. You have to
Yeah.
invest basically who you are in the process.
Mm-hmm.
Because in the end, ethnography explores the cultural phenomena from the point of view of the subject of the study.
Mm-hmm.
And you cannot really do that unless you participate in the life of the people.
Yeah. Yeah.
And see, and that is what I see in the book, that I mean, the way that you move the stories. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, the stories are so organic, so crispy, so bone and flesh, using the language of Fernando Segovia. So it's a magnificent work. I mean, I'm deeply impressed by that. Can you please tell me a little bit about uh, the, the, the introduction of the book? In the introduction of the book, you talk about the gospel of the American dream.
Mm-hmm.
What that means for you?
Yeah, so every religion comes from somewhere, right? They don't just drop down from heaven in a, in a way for us to
Really?
follow, right? So
Okay.
some things drop down from heaven, but I don't think the way we practice it does not fall down from from heaven.
They do not magically appear, right,
Yep,
in the
yeah, yeah,
vacuum of
no,
the universe.
yeah. So I argue that the prosperity gospel is an inherently American religion because it takes all the American ideals, right, the good and the bad, and it encapsulated in a spiritual form so that you can is digestible to
Mm.
everyone who has a spiritual bent, right? And what I mean is that prosperity gospel is it's a very modern religion. It's modern because it's formulaic, right? There's a logic behind it, right? And primitive religions, right, in the sociological sense, primitive religions are not always are not formulaic, right? They don't follow a formula. Prosperity gospel does, right? You have to have faith, you have to take action, and then you'll be blessed, right? And those are critical. You have to there are steps you have to take, and it's meritocratic, which is inherently American, right? The idea that you can have whatever you want if you follow the rules and work hard, right? Prosperity gospel says you can have whatever you want, right? Whatever you want is, all the success and victories that you want in life is what God wants for you, and you can have it if you work hard enough and you keep your faith, right? You can't doubt, right? Because that's doubting is questioning God's ability to bring about this blessing. So you have to be relentlessly optimistic, right? Faithful, thinking positively, and you have to work hard at it. The more controversial part, of course, is the working hard requires sacrificial acts to get, in their terms, in my terms, to get God's attention, right? So you have to do things that show that you have faith in this. So even before you have the money to buy your house, you begin to buy furniture for that house that you have yet to have, right? Because in faith, you have claimed it, right? It's doing things like this. The more controversial part, of course, is, when preachers say, if you give me $100, God will give you 100,000 in return, right? In my studies of all of this community, I've never seen anybody go bankrupt or even, become poor by giving money, because people are smart. People are smart. The pastors I met, they have a genuinely concern and care for the people. These are not, I think I say in there that these are no used car salesmen, right? Who they know they have a lemon, but they just don't want to get rid of it. These are people, they believe that if you work hard and have faith that, God, you can overcome any obstacle. And they do everything they possibly can to help their parishioners overcome their obstacles by having faith, by, being able to do this act of faith. And so in that sense, as a meritocratic religion, it's inherently American. It's very individualistic, right? It's all about it's about personal fulfillment. It's the, you know, there's a big movement on positive psychology in the psychology world, that about personal happiness, right? You know, Seligman and UPenn were in this movement to teach people how to be happy, and it's this very self-centered. You know, I have certain objections with that whole line of psychology. But in some ways, prosperity gospel rose at the same time, and it's a spiritual version of positive psychology, right? That the psychological well-being and personal satisfaction is therapeutic aspect of faith is very important. And then the most controversial and difficult thing I say is that uh, the United States of America, right, is a country that was founded on the principle of manifest destiny, right? That the Europeans, white Europeans, came and under the manifest destiny banner, they believed that God wanted them to have this land, and they embarked on a genocidal conquest towards the West, right? It didn't matter who they had to enslave or kill and massacre to get this land, because that's what God wanted for them. And I say that prosperity gospel is manifest destiny for the undestined. So for those who have been left out by manifest destiny, for those who are powerless, for those who don't have the power to conquer, right? Prosperity gospel gives them a form of what I call miraculous meritocracy, right? Everybody I met in this book, and most immigrants I know, they know that, you know, most of them are already working 2-3 jobs. They know that no matter how hard they work, how well they follow the rules, they're not going to become millionaires. They're not going to be able to reach the American dream as they have it, right? They know the reality, but they believe in miraculous meritocracy, in that their hard work might not lead them to where they want to be, but their hard work can get God's attention to perform a miracle for them to get them to where they want to be, right? And that's what I call miraculous meritocracy. And in that sense, at the core of it, at the very core of prosperity gospel, that's what I argue, right? It's at the end of the day, it's meritocratic. It's religion that gives entitlement to the disenfranchised, and in that sense, it's a very American religion.
Wow. Yes. And connecting that with the essence of chapter 1, when you talk about community of dreamers, what is your understanding and analysis of the power of dreams for the Latino immigrants in the context of the prosperity gospel?
Yeah, so that's something I've been thinking about a lot, right? With the upcoming election, right? The impending election in the United States. The American dream has been the defining ideology for this nation, right? It has captured the public imagination and the global imagination of what America is, right? And you go all around the world, historically, right, until very recently, historically, all around the world, you go to America to make it, right? Your future, the best things that you can have for you, it used to be that you come to America for these things. And it's a mythology, I think. It's a mythology, right? It is a myth. I think it's, you know, historically it's shown that the meritocracy and all of this, the idea that anybody can achieve their American dream has, you know, has very serious limitation, limited by, you know, in the U.S. race and class. But it is still the most dominant ideology, right? And this generation, right? A few years ago, they said the the young people now are the first generation in the US who are not going to do better than their parents, right? Whose lifespan will be shorter than their parents, right? So my children and younger, they're going to be the first generation who are not going to go further than us, than me, right? Yeah, as a whole. As a whole, the country has lost the capacity to dream, because many of us have been awakened to this reality that the dream was a myth. But if you read a lot of these theories of empires and nation states formation, right? There is a cycle for this, for the life of empires and states, right? They rise and they will fall in after certain number of years. They just run out of steam. The United States has been able to sustain this ideal because of immigrants. It was us, immigrants, new Americans, right? When the old batch of Americans have given up on this dream, new batch of Americans have come and believed in this dream and continue to work and devote ourselves and give to this country, right? To give for the greater good and build things. I think for the immigrants who can come, right, they still come with that dream. My concern now is that, since for more than 10 years now, right, the number of Mexicans leaving the US has been greater than the number of Mexicans coming in, right? Since 2000, I want to say 2007 or so, right? So the reverse migration of Mexicans specifically is greater now, more leaving than coming. There are fewer and fewer immigrants willing to come. And for the last, I want to say since its inception, right? But definitely for the last 50 years, right? If you look at all the not just corporations, right, but all the leading enterprises in America that dominates our lives today, just technology-wise, right? The very technology we have right now to do this was established by immigrants, right? YouTube, Google, like all these things that dominate our lives, all by immigrants. It was all immigrants who did this. And as the number of immigrants decline, as the energy and the heart of the dreams, right, the possibility for the future shifts somewhere else, and I think it is shifting to other areas. I don't know where yet, but I think it is declining in the US. There are fewer and fewer people believing this. I think it's, I don't think it's a bad thing. I think, like I said, I think the dream was a myth. I think there is a time and a place for that to end. But it's also a great opportunity for a new dream, right? Because whatever, where the Bible says, right, without a vision, the people perish. I think these immigrants and immigrants in general are still dreaming of what's possible. Many of us have not tried the things that have failed in the past, so we're willing to try new things. And I think it's a great opportunity for us to chart the course for the future, right, as immigrants in this country. And that's why I think places like, Neo Theological Seminary and all the educational institutions that serves our communities are so important, right? Because we are going to be called on to dream. Our dreams and our visions are going to be needed in this country, but we also need to be prepared to function within these systems, right? Because it takes generations to change the system. We're not going to change American democracy. We're not going to change the capitalism, right? From one generation to the next. These things are still going to be here, and we have to know how to function within these systems in order to bring about the change that's good for everybody.
And connecting with that interesting and deep analysis of the community of dreamers in the context of the USA, in the second chapter, you talk about the prescription for the dream. Uh, can you say something about that, please?
Prescription for the dream. What specifically?
For example, in the second chapter, you explore
Mhm.
the dynamics of the dreams for the Latino Pentecostals, and also the relevance
Oh,
of dreams for Pentecostals.
yeah,
Because
yeah. Okay, okay. Yes, yes,
yeah,
yes.
theologically, Pentecostals are deeply uh, connected and related with the power of dreams.
Hmm. Yeah.
Not
So,
only in terms of the phenomena of dreams, but also in terms of how dreams are the energizing factor for
yes.
the growth of Pentecostals globally. We have,
Mhm.
I mean, 500 million Pentecostals in the whole planet. So how do you understand that? What is your opinion about
So
that?
yeah, yeah. So in that chapter, I talk about so the prescription of the dream. I talk about the formula for it, right? And it's as you say, right? A lot of people uh, think that the especially Pentecostals and immigrants that you just cast this dream, right? And it's like you know lassoing in the moon or something. You just cast this dream, but I argue that it's not just a fantasy. It's not just a dream. It's not just positive thinking, right? It's not just if you think it, it'll become. There's positive thinking involved, but there's also a lot of hard work involved, right? There's a way that you achieve a dream, and in these churches, these communities I study, they don't just tell people to dream the impossible, right? There's a way that you have to work towards that dream, and this is very unique, as you said, of Pentecostals, that this is not just psychobabble, right? Just telling people to believe in yourself and dream as big as you can, and if you believe it, it'll come true. No, no, no. These are people who they dream of the impossible, but then they have concrete steps, right? So a lot of these churches, they'll tell you to dream to have your own businesses, and they'll have small businesses startup classes, and they have these services, right, that actually helps you to get to those dreams. Education is huge in these churches, right? They celebrate people when any high school graduate, middle school graduates, right, certificate, of course, college and PhD, all of these things, they celebrate these things because these are all steps people can take, concrete steps people can take to get to their dreams. I remember talking to Don Miller at the University of Southern California. He did a global study of Pentecostals, right? And he said that, and we were talking about this point specifically, right? That I said that this is not the reason, something that a lot of people miss, people who criticize prosperity gospel, right? They think that these preachers get up there and sell people a pipe dream and they walk away. But I said that when you go to these churches, it's not actually like that, right? The pastor does sell a big dream, does sell encourage people to believe something that for most of us is unbelievable, which is, by the way, every church, right? Every church, we all tell people to, as a Presbyterian, we all tell people to believe in things that to the average person, it's unbelievable. But in these churches, they provide concrete steps, right? There are prescriptions that they have to take to steps they have to take to do this. And Don Miller said that he saw this when he traveled around the world. This was in the 90s, the first time he went, and he met with all these Pentecostal communities, and he would meet with them, and they would say, they would point to these empty lands and say, I'm going to buy this land, or this is a church of 20 people, right? We're going to buy this land, we're going to build a school here, and we're going to build our 1,000-member church there, and then we're going to do a gym here and soccer stadium here. And he said 10 years later he went, and most of those churches, they did it, right? He said in 10 years, most of, this is Africa, South America. He went to a couple of places in Korea and India, and they had these dreams, but 10 years later, he went back to follow up, and there they were. They had the buildings, they had the people, they were They had grown. They did it, right? And so it's not just the importance of the dream, but all the steps that they provide for people to get to those dreams, and the rationale that they provide people for those who because not everybody reaches that dream, right? Not everybody gets their dream of whatever they want, but prosperity gospel offers a logic that for them it makes sense why they should keep going, right? Why they should persist, and why they should keep hope, which at the end of the day, that's what it is, right? A dream is about giving you hope, right? I'll never forget, I was in Brazil, in Sao Paulo, for a conference on prosperity gospel, and most of us there were not part of the prosperity gospel. All of us actually, yeah, all of us. None of us there were part of the prosperity gospel movement, and some were more critical than other. There were a few of us who were sociologists, some churches, some pastors and theologians, and some were a lot more critical than others. And as we were talking, one pastor from South Africa, he said, it's nice for us to sit around here at this resort center in Sao Paulo, a gated resort center in Sao Paulo, talking about this, discussing this, the faults and the shortcomings of prosperity gospel. But he says he's been to a hut of a single mother who has full-blown AIDS, has 5 kids. Her husband's already dead from AIDS. 3 of the kids are HIV positive, and she's dying, and nobody's coming. Nobody's coming to help her.
Wow.
And she asked this guy we were meeting with, she asked him, pray for me that I will be healed. I have enough faith. I have enough faith. If you pray for me that I'll be healed, I'll be healed. And he said, what do you want me to tell her? Right? What do you want me to say? Right? Are you going to get into a theological discussion with this lady? Right? When prosperity gospel, the logic, right, of this form of Christianity is the only hope she has, right? And that's for many immigrants, and for many of the Latin American immigrants I interview, a lot of them were undocumented. They're facing extreme challenges and marginalization. They know nobody's going to come in. They know amnesty is not going to happen. They know whoever is elected, nobody's going to come to help them. They know this. But why stay here and keep working so hard, right? Why stay here and keep sacrificing and giving everything you have for your children and hoping for a better future, right? They keep the dream because this faith tells them God will help you, right? Where everything else falls short, God will perform that miracle.
Wow. Powerful. So in my experience also as a professor and as a pastor, I think that when you encounter people who suffer, who are in crisis, and there is nothing that science can offer at that moment, what are you going to do? Just go into a philosophical, theological debate, or are you going to provide some hope and some consolation to the person? So in following that, in the 3rd chapter, you talk about change by the dream. So in the 2nd chapter, at the core, you're saying that the dreaming is not just dreaming in abstraction or just positive thinking about it, about the future, but also that the dreaming is deeply connected with proactive behavior. God will do what you are not able to do, but you have to do what you're supposed to do.
Yep.
Now, in the 3rd chapter, you talk about the prescription. I mean, in the 3rd chapter, you talk about change by the dream. Can you please elaborate on that?
Yeah. So as a sociological study, right, I believe from a sociological perspective, like Weber said, right, religion is a switchman, you know, that like the train tracks, right? Religion does direct the entire direction of your life. And so that's more of a chapter in analyzing what happens to an individual when they didn't believe in this, when they came. And most of the people I study and I interviewed in this book did not believe, which is not the case now, right? So things are very different now. The majority of the immigrants who are coming from Latin America, right, from Salvador, Honduras, and Guatemala, they are already prosperity gospel when they come, right? They, you know, close to 90% of everybody in Salvador, Honduras, and Guatemala are believe in that, you know, if you have faith, God will grant you prosperity and health, right? That this is from a Pew survey a few years ago. But you know, not in the case when I was doing this in 2007 and 8 and earlier too. But the people I studied did convert. They did not. They were either agnostics or, you know, culturally Catholics, and then they came into this faith and they had conversion experiences. And so I wanted to see. I wanted to analyze what happens to the Mexicanness of a Mexican when they adopt an inherently American religion, right? So we know, you know, Mexican Catholicism is extremely, extremely Mexican, right? And, you know, Mexico is famously known as probably the most culturally Catholic country in all of Latin America, right? It's so intertwined, right? That so many of the things you celebrate as Mexican are, you know, are intertwined with Catholicism. And so I was curious to see what happens if so much of your identity is wrapped up and shaped around Catholicism. What happens when you abandon Catholicism and adopt this inherently American religion, right? And so that's where I talk about the process of assimilation, right? The prosperity gospel, it's a path to assimilation for those for whom the traditional path of assimilation has been closed, right? Because of racism and other challenges, right? So again, a lot of the people I interviewed were undocumented. So assimilating in the traditional sense was not an option. And there was no desire to follow the traditional path of assimilation. So, you know, many decades ago, past generations, assimilation meant becoming a white Anglo-Saxon Protestant, right? Literally, you had to be white Anglo-Saxon Protestant to be a true American, right? In the old days, you know, at least culturally, right? That's how it was. That's why there were anti-Catholic movements, right? You know, all of these things. And thankfully, that's largely in the past, not totally, but largely in the past. And so these immigrants are coming with no desire to be white, no desire to imitate traditional white middle-class Protestant families, to get rid of, you know, they're not changing their names, right? Like, you know, like immigrants, my generation, right? We changed our name, we changed our cultures, we got rid of a lot of the things that distinguish us, right? To fit into America. They have no desire to do this, but in the process of becoming faithful prosperity gospel Pentecostals, they still, in their own terms, are assimilating to America, right? So they are assimilating into America, into a new form of Americans, right? So at the core, they're assimilating to these American ideals of meritocracy, individualism, self-fulfillment, right? You know, again, the idea of happiness, all these ideas that are not central in our cultures, right? We come from Latin America, we're a lot more communitarian and a lot less individualistic, and that's they're willing to give that up, right? The good of the community, right? For most communities outside of the U.S., the good of the good of the community is more important than the individual good. But in America, that's not the case, and and little by little, these are things that they're adopting, but again, in their own terms, right? So it's not a racialized assimilation, but it's an ideological assimilation, so that they are buying into this capitalist neoliberalist idea, right? That the that the material good is associated with contentment and fulfillment, that the free market is the way that for us to get there, right? The idea of democracy, right? That everybody should have a say, right? That everybody has equal power and equal authority over all things, right? These are things, new ideas that they're adopting and internalizing. Mm-hmm.
So, in essence, you argue through the book that spiritual maturity in prosperity gospel Pentecostalism is synonymous with achieving the American dream.
Yes. Yeah. And the title is very key. I say is their American dream, right? So it's unique to. It's not the traditional white American.
Right.
I mean, there are components of it, right? Of course, home ownership and a lot of these the traditional values are still there, but they're creating a new, charting a new path, which I predict. I think that's the future. That's the future of the American dream, right? That it will entail less tangible things and more. It's more, again, more therapeutic, more psychological, more individual. Yeah.
So, and that's also the second argument that you have in the book, and is that these Latino Pentecostal immigrants, they are integrated into American culture through this kind of prosperity gospel, and some of them, they are not even aware that they're being integrated.
Right. Yeah.
But in the process of integration is a metamorphosis, because there is a creation of a new dream.
That's right.
And that creation of a new dream is vital as a new oxygen for the USA.
Yes. Yeah. And that's why that's why I was saying, I think that this is the future, right? This is why our communities need to be prepping for what's coming, because yeah, it is like you said, it is the oxygen that the nation needs now and will need, right? Because there's just so much hopelessness and despair.
So ethnographically, what you're saying in the book is that at the core, prosperity gospel is more positive than negative.
I think so.
Because you're not really providing intentionally a theological analysis of prosperity gospel, but you are analyzing prosperity gospel from the perspective of ethnography. And ethnography is dancing with anthropology and sociology. And so in that symphony, basically, you're saying we have to look for the positive in this phenomenon of the Latino immigrants and the prosperity gospel. So in that light, can you provide a synopsis of the last chapter of the book, that is Dreaming of Prosperity at Home, chapter 4?
Well, so I have a number of stories. I encountered a number of people that I interview throughout this project, for which prosperity gospel literally saved their lives, right? Literally, right? One of the guys I feature in there, he tried to commit suicide. He tried to commit suicide, and he says, God saved him, and now he's in this church, very active. The woman that I talk about at the very end, right? She too is a survival of suicide, right? That when she was so hopeless at the lowest point in her life, she came to this faith, prosperity gospel. Christians reached out to her, and she runs her own cleaning business now in Virginia. right? So they're very clear positive changes, and the most positive, clear positive one. And I'm not the only one who said this, right? A lot of others who've studied Pentecostalism have shown that there there's a way that it affects the family, right? I say that I call it a more suave machismo, a term I got from one of my professors, Brad Wilcox. He's a sociology of the family. He talks about soft patriarchs in conservative Christianity, that they're still the patriarch, they're still the one who leads the family, but they have it's not a harsh form of patriarchy, right? So I say that, prosperity gospel, the communities I study in here, they are still there's still a form of machismo, but it's not a negative form, right? It's a softer version. The man still leads the house, the man still leads the families, and has the final say, as is traditional in many of our communities, our countries. But it's done in a way that in the role of a pastor as a congregation, right? So it's done, it's the type of leadership the man, the father, husband, right? And these are, very traditional family models, has to provide is motivated by love, right? And so in order for you to be prosperous according to this logic, right, according to the prescription, you have to live a moral life, right? So all the vices, the drinking, the smoking, the sleeping around, and all these things, you have to stop, right? So they stop these things, right? They stop spending time. The other thing prosperity gospel requires is that you spend a lot of time in church, right? So it's not just Sunday, but you go to Bible study, you go to the prayer meetings, and you have to show your faith by being active in the church. You go to evangelizing trips, right? Knocking on doors and all these things. And you have to have a model family, right? Because the model family, having an ideal traditional model family is both a blessing and a sign that you're blessed, right? So in communities where, tradition, you would think that prosperity gospel, having money is a sign of being blessed, and it is, right? But when there is no money, when everybody is making roughly the same, you need other things to raise your status, right? That's how, America has a caste system. And so even when we stripped away of all the other ways to, mark our status, we start creating new ones. And one of those things that's created in these communities is a traditional family. So that if there's a father, mother, and children who are active in the church, and they're all happy and together in church, that family is more likely to be asked to lead things in the church, more likely to be looked upon as leaders. So there's a certain form of capital, right? And I think that's the most direct way that the families are impacted, right? That they, in their home, right, all these things that were destructive to their families have had to, they've had to stop, and they've had to focus on, the fathers are required to pray with their family and their children, right? In practice, of course, the mother did it more in practice, right? But the expectation, right, is that the father be there to do these things. And all, all the men I've met who are active in this church, they give it a good try. They really believe this. They really believe that if they're good to their families and they devote their time there, they can they will be blessed by God, right? They will be able to achieve the dreams that they have. And other scholars have studied this in Latin America, right? And say that, their theory is that when you're not spending your money in all these vices and other outside expenses, you suddenly have more money to invest in your home, right? In your family. And so families naturally is more likely to rise up, right? Employers are more likely to hire you in many Latin American countries. They're more likely to hire you if they know you are a Christian, right? You're part of this Christian community, because they know you're not going to cheat, you're going to show up on time, and this thing raises your status in the community that that leads to greater income. So there is a you know, it's the almost the chicken and the egg thing, right? If you believe, does it really make you prosperous? I don't know if God makes you prosperous, but it gives you the practices and behavior that makes you more employable, right? And you know, like I said in there, that if you're more active in these churches, you're more likely to speak English too, right? Because you're more likely to be part of the communities that you know, they will have English classes, they will have you know, you'll be motivated to interact with people. So if you speak English in America, you're more likely to get jobs than those who don't, right? So that's so do you really become miraculously more prosperous? You know, some people say yes, and you know, God bless them, I hope it works, but I know for sure that it does give you the practices and tools and habits that make you more likely to be able to be prosperous. But at the same time, I also meet a lot of people, and this is the paradox of prosperity gospel that I talk about, right? I met a lot of people who turned down jobs on the weekends, right? Because you know, a lot of these manual labor, the seasonal workers, they have to work on the weekends, and they say no because they have to be at church. They have to be, you know, church responsibilities come first. So they actually lose opportunities to make more money because they are being faithful to their church, right?
Right.
So there is a paradoxical relationship there.
Right, but at the same time, that kind of decision will reinforce self-discipline.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And that self-discipline is a necessity to function in society. And it seems to me that I'm going to quote you because it's an important quotation connected with your analysis of the previous chapter in page 177 in the digital version of your book. You are saying prosperity gospel Pentecostalism offers more to its followers than casinos will ever offer to a gambler. I love that quote because it's so descriptive, right? Yeah, it's so.
I forgot I wrote that, but yes.
That quotation, man, is like a laser beam, right? What? To the heart. To the heart. I really enjoy your book, my brother. I think it's a serious work. I mean,
oh, thank you. Thank you.
From an academic perspective, I think that is one of the first serious works that is including the Latino community in the USA, analyzed from the perspective of integration, racism, in the context of Pentecostalism and the prosperity gospel. So before we conclude this dialogue, there is something else that you want to say about your future work. What do you want to do from here? What is your next book?
Well, from this project, I wanted to do the global Pentecostalism project and study what's happening in other countries, right? In our countries, when we used to have our own dreams, but now it is being replaced by the American dream, right? And I'm very fascinated, right? What happens when the Guatemalan dream becomes the American dream, right? This you know, prosperity gospel American dream. What happens to communities? What do we lose and what do we gain, right? I don't want to be all negative and critical of this, but I do claim that this is a form of a new form, a spiritual form of cultural imperialism that's spreading around the world, and I think it's important to study and think about. That global projects are harder to fund, so I have not been able to go very far with that project. My next book, the book I'm working on right now, academic book I'm working on right now, is a study of multiracial churches across the US in cities that have experienced racial tensions because of police shootings of Black men and boys. And I look at the the culture of these intentional and multiracial churches, and what's happening in these churches. How are they thinking? How are they making sense of our cultural moment? Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. I'm going to use your book for one of my courses in the fall, at the master's level, and also for a doctoral ministry intensive seminar. So I think that your book is an extremely valuable instrument to nurture a dialogue about prosperity gospel, Pentecostals, racism, immigration, colonialism, neocolonialism, and to what extent prosperity gospel also can become a powerful instrument of domestication.
Yes.
So that's why I think that your book is extremely valuable, because the methodology that you're using, ethnography, is extremely relevant in the way that Pentecostals theologize, because basically it's a methodology that can connect with Pentecostals directly in terms of dealing with the specific profiles of people. And I thank you for your quantity and quality of time invested in the book. I'm sure that you took many long hours doing research and walking with people, listening to people, and then reflecting and processing all the information. And finally, like the good wine, the book has come to print, and is produced by a very powerful press, and this is the University of North Carolina Press. Is you're talking about 90 years of history doing this kind of books, and also the commitment that they have to support new research, new academic, relevant, restorative, and revolutionary research. So thank you, Dr. Tony Lin, for this time, valuable and precious time, to talk about your contribution to this relevant dialogue. Thank you so much.
Yeah, no, thank you. Thank you. Bueno, ahora en castellano.
Son las 6:30.
Sí. Tenemos que hacer otro día.
Sí, tenemos que hacer otro día.
Bueno, cuando salga la traducción.
Lo cortamos.
Bueno, dale.
Brian. Despierta, Brian.
Yes, I'm here.
So we're finished, Brian.
Yes.
Okay, we need a few minutes. Let me have 5 minutes to talk to Dr. Lin, please.
All right, I will get off now. I will hand over the host, and then I will sign off.
Thank you.
Sounds good. Se acabó. A ver.
Okay. ¿Cómo lo ves?
No, salió bien, ¿no?
Oh, súper.
Sí,
navegaste con claridad y coherencia a través de cada capítulo, manteniendo la unidad de los dos argumentos principales que produces en el libro. Los dos argumentos son controversiales.